The tragic death of Mackenzie Mikowski, a 31-year-old nurse from Portland, Oregon, while visiting Budapest, shook the world. This is the story of her vibrant life, the events leading to her death, and the pursuit of justice that followed. Her memory inspires a global conversation about safety and accountability.
The tragic death of 31-year-old nurse Mackenzie Mikowski during a trip to Budapest has left the world shocked and grieving. Mackenzie, a compassionate and adventurous individual from Portland, Oregon, was visiting the Hungarian capital, which she fondly referred to as her happy place. Her love for travel and history brought her back to Budapest, unaware that this trip would be her last. On the night of November 7, 2024, Mackenzie met a 37-year-old Irish man, identified only by the initials LTM, at a nightclub in the city. The two were seen dancing and eventually left together, heading to LTM's rented apartment. What seemed like a chance encounter quickly turned into a horrific crime. The Hungarian police later revealed that Mackenzie was killed in LTM's apartment during what they described as an intimate encounter. LTM's actions following her death painted a disturbing picture of calculated steps to conceal the crime. He allegedly placed Mackenzie's body in a wardrobe before transferring it into a suitcase. The suspect then rented a car and drove approximately 90 miles to a wooded area near Lake Balaton, where he disposed of Mackenzie's body. The following day, Mackenzie was reported missing, prompting a massive search involving her family and Hungarian authorities. Investigators uncovered key evidence linking LTM to the crime. Mackenzie's backpack was found near the Lake Livingston Dam, and surveillance footage from the nightclub confirmed the pair had left together. Crime scene photos revealed items belonging to Mackenzie, including her handbag and credit card, further tying the suspect to her disappearance. Online searches conducted by LTM prior to his arrest added a chilling layer to the case. He had reportedly looked up methods for disposing of a body, the competence of Budapest police, and whether wild boars at Lake Balaton might consume human remains. These searches highlighted the premeditation behind his actions. On November 10, 2024, Hungarian police arrested LTM, who initially claimed that Mackenzie's death was an accident. However, the evidence contradicted his account, leading to charges of murder and obstruction of justice. Police released footage of LTM guiding officers to the location where he had left Mackenzie's body, solidifying their case against him. Mackenzie's family flew to Hungary in hopes of finding her alive, only to learn of her tragic fate during their journey. At a candlelight vigil held in Budapest, her father, Bill Michalski, expressed his heartbreak and disbelief, saying, "There was no reason for this to happen." The tragedy left Mackenzie's loved ones and friends devastated. Her legacy as a kind and compassionate nurse who touched many lives remains a beacon of light amidst the darkness of her death. The case drew international attention, with people around the world mourning the loss of a young woman whose life was cut short too soon. The investigation into Mackenzie Mikowski's death was swift and thorough. Hungarian authorities, working alongside international agencies, pieced together the timeline of events leading to her murder. The evidence against LTM, from surveillance footage to digital records, built a strong case. One of the key breakthroughs came from LTM's online activity. Searches about corpse disposal and law enforcement capabilities painted a picture of calculated intent. These chilling details became central to the prosecution's argument as they demonstrated premeditation. LTM's behavior during and after the crime was also scrutinized. The act of cleaning his apartment, placing Mackenzie's body in a suitcase, and driving miles to dispose of it showed a clear attempt to cover his tracks. His claim that her death was accidental was further undermined by the brutality of the crime. The discovery of Mackenzie's body near Lake Balaton provided investigators with crucial evidence. The wooded area where she was found was remote, underscoring the suspect's efforts to hide her remains. Despite his attempts, justice began closing in on him. The Michalski family, deeply grieving, became active participants in the pursuit of justice for Mackenzie. Their presence in Hungary brought international attention to the case, and their strength amidst unimaginable loss inspired many. Prosecutors in Hungary worked tirelessly to ensure a fair trial. The evidence presented included crime scene photos, forensic analysis, and testimony from experts. LTM's history and actions were laid bare in court, leaving little doubt about his culpability. The trial highlighted the need for greater safety, measures for travelers, and the importance of vigilance when meeting strangers. Mackenzie's story served as a sobering reminder of the dangers that can arise even in the most unexpected circumstances. The trial and its aftermath served as a reminder of the importance of justice and accountability. While the pain of losing Mackenzie will never fade, her family's resilience has been a source of inspiration to many. Mackenzie's friends and family honored her memory by sharing stories of her kindness and dedication to helping others. Her work as a nurse was celebrated, with many remembering her as a bright light in their lives. The verdict in the case provided a sense of closure for Mackenzie's loved ones, though the pain of her loss remains. The court's decision to hold LTM accountable for his actions was a testament to the power of evidence and the determination of those seeking justice. The tragic death of Mackenzie Michalski sparked global conversations about traveler safety and the importance of thorough investigations. Her story resonated with people worldwide, many of whom found solace in the outpouring of support for her family. Mackenzie's legacy lives on through her family's efforts to raise awareness about safety while traveling. They have advocated for better education on personal security, especially for solo travelers, and have worked to keep Mackenzie's memory alive. Her father, Bill Michalski, spoke passionately about the importance of cherishing loved ones and taking precautions when abroad. His words at the Budapest vigil touched many as he described Mackenzie's love for the city and her adventurous spirit. The case also brought attention to the role of technology in solving crimes. Digital evidence, such as LTM's online searches and surveillance footage, played a pivotal role in securing justice for Mackenzie. This highlighted the value of collaboration between law enforcement agencies across borders. Mackenzie's story inspired initiatives to improve traveler safety, including educational campaigns and partnerships with travel organizations. These efforts aim to ensure that tragedies like hers are prevented in the future. The Michalski family continues to honor Mackenzie by supporting causes she cared about, such as healthcare and community service. They have established scholarships for nursing students, ensuring that her compassionate spirit lives on through others. Mackenzie's tragic story has become a call to action, urging travelers to prioritize safety and encouraging communities to support those in need. Her life, though cut short, continues to inspire positive change. Her friends and colleagues remember her as a kind-hearted individual who made a difference in the lives of those around her. The candlelight vigil in Budapest was a testament to the impact she had on people from all walks of life.
Welcome in, everyone, to another deep dive, this time into the case of Mackenzie Michalski.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
It is, and as many of our listeners know, Mackenzie was a 31-year-old nurse from Portland, Oregon, and this case really captivated the attention of people around the world.
Definitely did. And
Yes.
and you know, it's one of those that just really hits home because it could happen to anyone.
Right, exactly. And today we're going to be using this really in-depth account of the case that was put together, and we're going to try to get to the bottom of what happened.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly interesting about this case is the role of digital evidence. You know, we'll get into that, but it really shows how our online activity can be used to, piece together events.
Right. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about. Like, we leave these digital trails everywhere we go.
All the time.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. So the story begins on November 7th, 2024. Mackenzie's out in Budapest, a city that she actually loved and had visited before she called it her happy place. And she's at a nightclub when she meets this 37-year-old Irish man. We're just going to call him LTM for now.
Right.
And from what we can gather from witness statements and security footage, it seems like a pretty typical night out. You know, they're dancing, they're talking.
Yeah, it seems very ordinary. Just two people meeting at a club.
Exactly. But things take a very dark turn. Security footage shows them leaving the club together and heading toward LTM's rented apartment.
Yeah. And we know now that this encounter turned deadly.
It did, according to Hungarian police. Mackenzie's life was cut short in that apartment during what they described as an intimate encounter.
And you know what's really disturbing is that instead of seeking help, LTM's first instinct was to try and cover up what he had done.
Yeah, that's always a red flag, isn't it?
Absolutely. He tried to hide Mackenzie's body first in a wardrobe, and then he transferred it to a suitcase.
Wow. I mean, just thinking about the callousness of that,
It's chilling, and it gets worse.
Yeah.
He then rented a car and drove almost 100 miles to a remote area near Lake Balaton, where he disposed of her body.
So this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated.
Absolutely. It was premeditated.
Yeah.
And, as the investigation unfolded, this became even more evident.
Right. And while all of this is going on, Mackenzie's family and friends back home are starting to worry.
Of course.
She's not answering her phone. She's not responding to messages, which is completely out of character for her. And the next day, she's officially reported missing.
And you can only imagine the agony her loved ones must have been going through, not knowing what happened to her.
Absolutely. And as the investigation gets underway, authorities start to uncover these key pieces of evidence.
Right.
So they find her backpack near Lake Livingston Dam, and they have that security footage from the nightclub that places her with LTM.
And that footage was critical because they didn't have her phone to track, so it really helped them establish a timeline.
Right, and then comes the search of LTM's apartment, and that's where investigators find more of Mackenzie's belongings, her handbag, her credit card.
The evidence was piling up.
Yeah, making it pretty clear that LTM was involved in her disappearance. But here's where things get really, really disturbing. Before his arrest, LTM conducted a series of online searches that revealed just how premeditated this whole thing was.
Yeah, this is where the digital footprint comes in.
He was looking into methods of body disposal. He was researching the success rate of the Budapest police in solving murders. And he was even looking into whether wild boars in the area might consume human remains.
I mean, just think about that for a second. He was actually researching if wild boars could get rid of a body.
It's horrifying, and it really shows the dark side of the internet, right? Something that we use for so much good can also be used to plan these horrific acts.
Absolutely. His digital trail became this crucial piece of evidence. It exposed his intentions, and ultimately it helped to seal his fate.
And 3 days after Mackenzie vanished, LTM was arrested by Hungarian police.
And initially he tries to claim that Mackenzie's death was an accident, but the evidence quickly contradicted his story. The police actually released footage of LTM leading them to where he had disposed of Mackenzie's body.
Wow. And meanwhile, her family had traveled to Hungary desperately hoping to find her alive.
Heartbreaking.
It's just unimaginable the pain they must have gone through traveling to a foreign country hoping for the best, only to be met with this horrific news.
And at a candlelight vigil in Budapest, Mackenzie's father, Bill Michalski, spoke about the profound loss. He said, "There was no reason for this to happen."
A powerful statement and a stark reminder that behind these headlines, behind the legal proceedings, are real people whose lives are forever changed by these tragedies.
It's a loss that will be felt forever. So we left off with LTM's arrest, and as we know, he was facing some pretty serious charges.
Yeah, murder and obstruction of justice, and the prosecution was ready to use all the evidence. We talked about the physical evidence, the witness statements, that digital trail to build a really solid case against him.
Right, and they really had to be thorough because, they wanted to secure a conviction for Mackenzie's family.
Absolutely. They wanted to make sure justice was served, and I can't even imagine what it must have been like for Mackenzie's family to sit through those court proceedings.
Oh, it must have been excruciating having to relive that trauma over and over again.
And to have traveled all the way from the U.S. to Hungary for the trial. It just shows the depth of their love for Mackenzie and their determination to see justice done.
Absolutely. Their strength and resilience throughout this whole ordeal is really remarkable.
And, their presence in Hungary really brought a lot of international attention to the case.
Yeah, it definitely put pressure on the authorities to make sure everything was handled properly.
It became more than just a local crime. It resonated with people all over the world, and I think it sparked some important conversations about traveler safety.
For sure, especially for people who are traveling alone.
Yeah.
It made people think twice about the risks involved.
Right. It's all about finding that balance between encouraging adventure and exploration, but also acknowledging that there are real dangers out there.
Exactly. And Mackenzie's case tragically highlighted those dangers.
Now, getting back to the trial, LTM's defense team tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case.
Of course.
But the evidence was just too strong. They tried to argue that Mackenzie's death was an accident.
Right. But his actions after her death really undermined that claim.
Absolutely. I mean, hiding the body, driving miles to dispose of it, those internet searches he conducted beforehand.
All of that pointed to premeditation.
Exactly. So the jury had a lot to consider, but eventually they reached a verdict, and that verdict, as we'll discuss in just a moment, sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. All right, so after all the evidence and testimony and the waiting, the jury finally reached a verdict.
They did, and after careful deliberation, they found LTM guilty.
Guilty on both counts.
On both counts, murder and obstruction of justice.
Wow. I mean, in some ways, it feels like there's a sense of relief that justice was served, but
all right.
It doesn't bring Mackenzie back.
No, it doesn't. And nothing can truly heal the pain that her family and friends are going through.
No, but hopefully this verdict brings them some sense of closure.
Some peace, yeah.
And speaking of Mackenzie's family, I just can't say enough about their strength and resilience throughout this whole ordeal.
That's remarkable.
They were so actively involved in the pursuit of justice for their daughter.
Absolutely. And they've also been incredibly vocal about turning their grief into something positive.
Yeah, they've really become advocates for traveler safety, haven't they?
They have, especially Mackenzie's father, Bill Michalski. He's been urging people to be more cautious, especially when traveling alone.
And I think that's so important, right? To learn from this tragedy and do what we can to prevent something like this from happening again.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, and being aware of the risks is the first step.
But, I think it's also important to remember that Mackenzie was so much more than just a victim.
Oh, absolutely.
She had a life, she had dreams, she had people who loved her.
And she made a real difference in the world. She was a nurse. She was dedicated to helping others.
Yeah, and from everything we've heard about her, she was just this incredibly kind and compassionate person.
And adventurous.
Yes, always up for a new experience, and her family has been so open about sharing those stories about her life and her personality.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's a way to keep her memory alive.
And I think it helps us to see beyond the tragedy and remember the person that she was.
And it's cases like this that also remind us of the importance of international cooperation.
Yeah.
I mean, without the collaboration between U.S. and Hungarian authorities, who knows how this case might have turned out.
Exactly. It shows how interconnected we are globally and how vital it is for law enforcement agencies to work together.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I think it's important to hold on to the hope that comes from Mackenzie's story.
Yeah. Amidst the tragedy.
Yeah, that hope that comes from her family's strength, from the pursuit of justice, and from the changes that are being made to improve traveler safety.
There's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we can find light, and we can create positive change.
We can honor Mackenzie's memory by prioritizing safety, by spreading kindness, and by continuing to advocate for a world where tragedies like this become a thing of the past.
And for our listener who requested this deep dive, we hope this exploration has brought some understanding and maybe even some peace.
And remember, everyone stay safe out there, look out for each other, and never stop exploring the world, but do it with awareness and with caution.
The murder of Rachel Winkler by her husband Todd Winkler shocked the nation and exposed the dark undercurrents of a seemingly perfect marriage. This case delves into the events leading to Rachel's death, the trial that followed, and the enduring lessons about control, violence, and justice.
Rachel Winkler, a talented artist and mother of 3, lived with her husband Todd Winkler in Cameron Park, California. Their outwardly idyllic marriage concealed years of growing tension, emotional neglect, and allegations of abuse. On February 27, 2012, this facade shattered when Rachel was found murdered in their home. Todd Winkler called 911, reporting that Rachel was dead inside their house. When police arrived, Todd was on the front steps, claiming Rachel had attacked him with scissors during an argument. He alleged that he acted in self-defense, seizing the scissors and fatally stabbing her in the neck. The crime scene painted a different picture. Rachel's body lay in a pool of blood with clear signs of a struggle. Forensic evidence contradicted Todd's claim of self-defense, suggesting an act of calculated violence rather than an impulsive reaction. Rachel's family described her as a vibrant and loving woman who had grown increasingly unhappy in her marriage. By 2011, she had confided in friends about feeling neglected and emotionally abandoned by Todd. Her affair with James White, a local contractor, underscored her yearning for companionship and respect. The day before her murder, Rachel told James that she planned to leave Todd. This revelation became a crucial piece of the prosecution's case, as it established Todd's motive: fear of losing control and the financial fallout of a divorce. Neighbors recalled frequent arguments between Todd and Rachel, further painting a picture of a tumultuous relationship. Despite Todd's claims of innocence, his behavior in the days following the murder raised red flags. The investigation revealed Todd's history of erratic and troubling behavior. He had served as an F-16 fighter pilot in Japan, where he became obsessed with samurai culture. This fascination manifested in bizarre and violent outbursts, including one in court where he screamed, "You are not samurai," during opening statements. Rachel's murder was not Todd's first brush with tragedy. In 1999, his first wife, Catherine Winkler, died in a suspicious car crash in Georgia. Todd claimed that Catherine lost control of their truck while driving him to the hospital for an allergic reaction. Investigators ruled the crash an accident, though lingering doubts persisted. As the investigation unfolded, the evidence against Todd mounted. Photographs of his minor injuries from the alleged kill or be killed struggle failed to support his claims. Prosecutors argued that Todd's actions were premeditated, driven by his desire to avoid a costly divorce and maintain control. Rachel's father, Don Hatfield, a renowned artist, mourned the loss of his daughter while seeking justice. His paintings of Rachel, once a muse and a source of inspiration, became a poignant reminder of her life and legacy. Todd Winkler's trial began on September 23, 2014, drawing national attention. Prosecutors described him as a manipulative and violent man who viewed Rachel's independence as a threat to his control. They argued that he killed her to prevent her from leaving him. The defense painted a vastly different picture, claiming that Todd acted in self-defense during a life-threatening altercation. They highlighted his history of mental health issues, including PTSD from his time in the Air Force, to explain his erratic behavior. During the trial, Todd's bizarre courtroom outbursts shocked the jury. His erratic behavior included shouting in a foreign accent and accusing the prosecutor of dishonesty. These antics, coupled with the overwhelming evidence, undermined his credibility. Prosecutors presented key evidence, including Rachel's plans to leave Todd, the scissors used in the murder, and forensic analysis that contradicted Todd's account of the struggle. Witnesses described Rachel's growing fear of Todd and her determination to start a new life. The trial also revisited the death of Todd's first wife, Catherine. While her death was ruled accidental, prosecutors used the circumstances to demonstrate a pattern of suspicious behavior. They argued that Todd's history of avoiding accountability showed a calculated mindset. After 12 days of testimony, the jury found Todd Winkler guilty of first-degree murder on October 22, 2014. Rachel's family expressed relief and gratitude for the verdict, which brought a measure of closure to their painful journey. Todd was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge described his actions as cruel and deliberate, emphasizing the devastating impact on Rachel's children and loved ones. The Winkler case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of control, emotional manipulation, and unresolved mental health issues. It also highlighted the importance of supporting individuals in abusive relationships and recognizing the warning signs of escalating violence. Rachel's memory lives on through her family and Don Hatfield's artwork. Her tragic story continues to inspire conversations about domestic violence prevention and the pursuit of justice for victims.
Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the tragic case of Rachel Winkler.
Yeah, this one's
You guys
It's a tough one.
sent us a ton of material on this one.
Absolutely.
News articles, court documents,
Yeah.
even some forum discussion.
A lot of foreign discussion.
Yeah, looks like this case really captured people's attention.
Yes, and for good reason.
Yeah.
It's a story that really has it all.
Mm.
You know, seemingly perfect family,
Right?
shocking murder,
Right.
and just this web of secrets and lies
Yeah.
that took years to unravel.
So let's just start with the basics.
Sure.
Rachel Winkler
Yep.
was found dead in her home
Yes.
in Cameron Park, California,
Mm-hmm.
back in 2012.
That's right.
Her husband, Todd,
Mm-hmm.
immediately claimed self-defense,
Immediately.
saying she attacked him with scissors.
Scissors? Yeah.
But as the investigation unfolded, that story began to fall apart.
It unraveled quickly.
Yeah.
What seemed like a pretty open and shut case
Mm-hmm.
quickly turned into this puzzle
Right.
with a bunch of missing pieces.
Yeah.
The forensic evidence didn't line up with Todd's account.
Right.
There were questions about his past, including the death of his first wife.
Right.
And then there's the whole samurai obsession thing.
Okay, so let's back up a bit before we get into the twists and turns
Sure.
of the investigation.
Yep.
Paint us a picture of Rachel's life
Okay.
before all this happened.
So from the outside looking in,
Mm-hmm.
Rachel really had it all.
Right.
She was a talented artist, a devoted mother to her 3 children,
Right.
and they lived in a beautiful home.
Yeah.
But just beneath the surface,
Mm-hmm.
there were these cracks in her marriage.
Right.
She confided in some friends about feeling emotionally neglected by Todd.
And this wasn't just a case of like he works too much or they've grown apart, right?
No, not at all.
This was something deeper,
Much deeper.
a fundamental incompatibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting to consider the societal pressures at play here.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel was a creative soul, an artist.
Right.
She likely craved a certain level of emotional depth and validation that Todd, perhaps focused on his career and more practical matters,
Right.
wasn't really equipped to provide.
Right.
The emotional neglect she felt wasn't just a lack of attention, it
Yeah.
was a lack of understanding,
Mm-hmm.
a mismatch in the way they experienced and expressed their emotions.
Well, it's almost like she was missing a part of herself in that relationship.
100%.
And this eventually led her
Yeah.
to have a affair with James White,
That's right.
a local contractor.
Yeah. And while some people might just see the affair
Yeah.
as a simple betrayal,
Right.
I think it's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
For Rachel, it wasn't just about romance.
Right.
It was about finding that missing piece, seeking out the validation and emotional connection she craved.
It's tragic, really.
It is.
She was just trying to fill a void,
Yeah.
a need that wasn't being met
Right.
in her marriage.
It happens.
And this affair would later become a key piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
Because just one day before her death,
Yeah.
Rachel told James that she was planning to leave Todd.
This is where the motive starts to come into focus.
Mhm.
Todd, facing the prospect of losing his wife, his family,
Right.
and potentially his financial security, suddenly had a lot to lose.
And remember, Todd had a history
Oh, yeah.
of troubling behavior.
Right.
There was the incident in court years later
Yeah.
where he shouted about samurai.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the shadow of his first wife's death,
Right.
Catherine,
Mm-hmm.
which was ruled an accident at the time.
At the time. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into Todd's past,
Okay.
let's focus on the day of the murder. So this seemingly open and shut case
Mm-hmm.
took a turn when investigators started looking into the details.
Right.
Todd's 911 call painted a picture of a desperate struggle
Mm-hmm.
of a man fighting for his life
Right.
against his scissor-wielding wife.
Right.
But the crime scene told a different story.
So what didn't add up?
Well-
what were the red flags?
For starters,
Yeah.
the forensic evidence didn't match up with his claims.
Oh, great.
While there were signs of a struggle,
Mm-hmm.
the extent of Rachel's injuries didn't really support Todd's story
Right.
of this frantic life or death battle.
Hold on. Wouldn't the defense argue
Sure,
that even minor injuries can be traumatic
of course.
in a life or death struggle?
Right.
Maybe he just got lucky.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the defense would later argue.
Right.
But remember, the prosecution had a whole team of experts analyzing the evidence.
Right.
They weren't just looking at the severity of the wounds, they were looking at the angles.
Yeah.
The force required, the blood spatter patterns.
Okay.
All of it just pointed to a more deliberate and violent attack than what Todd had described.
I see. So it wasn't just the physical evidence that was raising doubt.
It was a lot more than that.
There were inconsistencies in Todd's own account of what happened.
His story kept changing.
Right.
Little details didn't add up. And when you combine those inconsistencies with the forensic evidence and Rachel's recently revealed plans to leave him, it creates a very different picture than the one Todd initially presented.
So now the investigation starts to shift.
Yeah.
It's no longer just about determining the sequence of events. It's about understanding Todd Winkler.
Exactly.
His motives, his past, his psychological state.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because to understand what happened that night, you have to go back, way back to another tragedy that cast a long shadow over this case. The death of Todd's first wife, Catherine.
All right, let's unpack that.
Okay.
Tell us about Catherine Winkler.
All right.
And the circumstances surrounding her death.
Catherine Winkler died in 1999, years before Todd met Rachel.
Okay.
She was killed in a car crash in Georgia, and at the time it was ruled an accident.
Okay.
Todd claimed she lost control of their truck while driving him to the hospital.
But wasn't there always a cloud of suspicion hanging over that incident?
There were whispers, rumors. Some people in Catherine's family never fully believed it was an accident. But without any concrete evidence, the case remained closed until now.
So the investigation into Rachel's death breathed new life.
New life, exactly.
Into the doubts surrounding Catherine's death.
That's right.
So the prosecution starts to look at Todd's past with fresh eyes.
Fresh eyes.
They see a pattern emerging.
Yeah.
2 suspicious deaths.
Right.
Both involving women close to Todd. Both with unanswered questions.
And I imagine this raises a whole host of legal and ethical questions.
Absolutely.
Can they really use a previous case? Especially one that was ruled an accident to build their case against Todd in Rachel's murder?
Yeah.
It's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
While they couldn't reopen the investigation into Catherine's death, they could use it to establish a pattern of behavior to suggest that Todd had this history of escaping accountability.
So they're essentially saying,
pretty much,
if he could get away with it once, why not twice?
It's a risky strategy, but it seems to have been effective by bringing up Catherine's death. The prosecution planted seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds. They made it harder for the defense to portray Todd as this grieving husband who had simply acted in self-defense.
This is where the line between due process and seeking justice gets blurry.
Absolutely.
How do you balance the need to present all relevant evidence with the risk of unfairly prejudicing the jury against the defendant?
It's a question that legal scholars have been grappling with for centuries. In this case, the judge ultimately allowed the prosecution to introduce evidence related to Catherine's death. But it was a decision that was not taken lightly.
It's a tough call.
It is.
On the one hand, you don't want to deprive the jury of potentially crucial information.
Of course.
But on the other hand, you don't want to convict someone based on speculation or innuendo.
And that's what makes this case so compelling. It forces us to confront these difficult questions, these gray areas where the law and morality intersect.
So we've got this complex web of evidence, conflicting narratives, and a defendant with a penchant for samurai theatrics. How did all this play out during the trial itself? What were some of the key moments that swayed the jury?
Aside from Todd's dramatic outbursts, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence that contradicted his self-defense claim. They brought forth Rachel's plans to leave, her fears of Todd, and the expert testimony that debunked his version of the struggle.
And what about the defense?
Well, they focused on Todd's mental state, arguing that his PTSD and samurai obsession had warped his perception of reality, leading him to believe that he was truly in danger when Rachel allegedly attacked him. They also tried to portray Rachel as the aggressor, suggesting that she had a history of volatile behavior and that Todd was simply defending himself.
So it became a battle of credibility.
Exactly. A question of who the jury believed more.
100%.
The seemingly stable and successful businessman.
Right.
Or the troubled veteran struggling with his demons.
And ultimately, it seems the jury sided with the prosecution. They found Todd Winkler guilty of first-degree murder.
Wow.
The judge, in his sentencing remarks, called Todd's actions cruel and deliberate, emphasizing the devastating impact on Rachel's children and loved ones.
It's hard to imagine the emotional toll this must have taken.
It is.
On everyone involved.
Right.
Rachel's family, her friends.
Her friends.
Even the jurors who had to sit through weeks of graphic testimony and emotional arguments.
What was the reaction to the verdict?
Yeah, what was the reaction?
There was a sense of relief, of justice being served, but it was also a bittersweet victory.
Right.
Rachel's death was a tragedy that could never be undone.
Of course.
And her children were left to grapple
with the loss of their mother and the horrific circumstances surrounding her death.
It's a stark reminder.
It is.
That even in the face of justice, there are no true winners.
No.
In a case like this, everyone loses something.
Everyone.
But maybe, just maybe, Rachel's story
I hope so.
Can serve as a warning. A lesson about the dangers of unchecked control.
Right.
And the importance of recognizing the signs of abuse before it's too late.
That's a powerful sentiment, and it brings us to the heart of this deep dive. We've explored the evidence, the trial, the complexities of the case, but what does it all mean? Why should this story, this tragedy, matter to those who never knew Rachel Winkler?
That's a great question.
It is.
And I think it's one that we'll explore in more detail in part 2.
Absolutely.
We'll delve into the broader implications of this case, the lessons we can learn, and the actions we can take to prevent future tragedies like this from happening.
That's what we need to do. We have to learn from this.
Absolutely.
So the courtroom became a battleground, not just of evidence, but of perception.
How Todd presented himself became as crucial as the facts themselves.
100%.
So let's talk about Todd.
Okay.
We've hinted at this samurai obsession.
Right.
It seems like something out of a movie.
It really does.
What's the story there?
Well, Todd's fascination with samurai culture stemmed from his time as an F-16 pilot stationed in Japan. He became enamored with their code of honor, their discipline, their swordsmanship.
Sounds harmless enough.
Plenty
of people have hobbies, right?
Sure.
What made this different?
Well, it wasn't just a hobby for Todd. It was an obsession. He immersed himself in samurai history, literature, martial arts. He even had a collection of samurai swords displayed very prominently in his home.
And I remember reading about some unsettling incidents, even before Rachel's death, where this obsession manifested in some pretty bizarre ways.
There were reports of Todd dressing up in full samurai attire, engaging in mock sword fights.
Wow.
Witnesses described him shouting in Japanese, making threats. His behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, unpredictable.
It almost sounds like he was losing touch with reality. Blurring the lines between his fascination with samurai culture and his own life.
That's a key point. And this disconnect, this blurring of reality became a central theme in the trial. The prosecution argued that Todd's obsession with samurai was more than just a quirk. It was a symptom of a deeper psychological disturbance.
So how did this samurai obsession play out in the courtroom? Didn't he have that outburst during the trial?
Yes, he did. And it was a very pivotal moment. During cross-examination, Todd became agitated and started yelling at the prosecutor in this really thick, almost theatrical Japanese accent, shouting, "You are not samurai."
Wow. I can only imagine how that played with the jury.
It
seems like that would hurt his defense more than help it.
Well, it's funny you say that because it's sort of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, that outburst could be seen as evidence of Todd's mental instability, which was a key part of their defense strategy. They argued that he suffered from PTSD stemming from his military service and that his erratic behavior was a manifestation of his trauma.
So they're trying to use his outburst,
Yeah.
his samurai obsession, to create this image
Exactly.
of a troubled veteran struggling with his demons.
Yeah, they're saying, look, this man is clearly not in his right mind.
Right.
He's not capable of this cold, calculated murder
Yeah.
that the prosecution is alleging.
Right. But on the other hand, as you pointed out,
Yeah.
that outburst made him look unpredictable.
Yeah.
Dangerous. Even
Right.
it probably alienated some jurors
Oh, believe
and
it.
made it harder for them to sympathize with him.
Absolutely.
It's such a fascinating psychological element to this case.
It is.
You have this clash of narratives.
Yes.
The prosecution portraying Todd as a manipulative.
Right. And controlling husband.
Right.
The defense painting him as this troubled veteran struggling with mental illness.
And in the middle of it all is this larger-than-life samurai persona that Todd has created for himself. A persona that both fascinates and repulses.
Yeah, it's really strange.
It makes you wonder how much of it is an act, a way to deflect blame, and how much of it
is a genuine reflection of his inner turmoil. Absolutely. And then there's the shadow of Catherine Winkler's death hanging over everything.
Yeah. How did the prosecution use that in their case?
Well, they argued that it established a pattern of suspicious behavior. While they couldn't directly link Todd to Catherine's death, they presented evidence suggesting that he benefited financially from her passing. They also pointed out that there were inconsistencies in his account of the car crash, just like there were inconsistencies in his account of Rachel's death.
So they're essentially saying, if he could get away with it once,
pretty much,
why not twice?
Yeah, it's a risky strategy.
Yeah.
But it seems to have been effective.
Right.
By bringing up Catherine's death. The prosecution planted those seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds.
Yeah.
It made it a lot harder for the defense to portray Todd as this grieving husband who had simply acted in self-defense.
This is where the line between due process and seeking justice gets blurry.
It's tricky.
How do you balance the need to present all relevant evidence with the risk of unfairly prejudicing the jury against the defendant?
It's a question that legal scholars have been grappling with for a long time. In this case, the judge ultimately allowed the prosecution to introduce evidence related to Catherine's death. But again, it was not a decision that was taken lightly.
It's a tough call.
Very tough call.
On one hand, you don't want to deprive the jury of potentially crucial information.
Of course.
But on the other hand, you don't want to convict someone based on speculation or innuendo.
No, and that's what makes this case so compelling. It forces us to confront these really difficult questions, these gray areas where the law and morality intersect.
So we've got this complex web of evidence, conflicting narratives, and a defendant with a penchant for samurai theatrics.
Oh, yeah.
How did all of this play out during the trial itself?
Aside from Todd's dramatic outbursts, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence that contradicted his self-defense claim. They brought forth Rachel's plans to leave, her fears of Todd, and the expert testimony that debunked his version of the struggle.
Okay, and what about the defense?
Well, they focused on Todd's mental state. Arguing that his PTSD and samurai obsession had really warped his perception of reality, leading him to believe that he was in danger when Rachel allegedly attacked him.
They also tried to portray Rachel as the aggressor. Suggesting she had a history of volatile behavior. That Todd was simply defending himself.
Exactly.
So it became a battle of credibility. A question of who the jury believed more. This seemingly stable and successful businessman. Or the troubled veteran struggling with his demons.
And ultimately, it seems the jury sided with the prosecution. They found Todd Winkler guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, in his sentencing remarks, called Todd's actions cruel and deliberate, emphasizing the impact this had on Rachel's children and loved ones.
It's hard to imagine. The emotional toll this must have taken on everyone involved.
It is.
Rachel's family, her friends, even the jurors who had to sit through weeks of graphic testimony.
Absolutely.
An emotional argument.
What was the reaction to the verdict?
What was the reaction?
There was a sense of relief, of justice being served.
But also bittersweet.
Yes, very much so.
Because Rachel's death is a tragedy that can never be undone.
Never.
And her children are left to grapple with the loss of their mother, the horrific circumstances surrounding her death.
It's a stark reminder that even in the face of justice, there are no true winners in a case like this.
Right. Everyone loses something.
Everyone.
But maybe, just maybe, Rachel's story can serve as a warning.
It has to.
The lesson about the dangers of unchecked control.
Right.
And the importance of recognizing the signs of abuse before it's too late.
That's a powerful sentiment.
It is.
And it brings us to the heart of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the evidence, the trial, the complexities of the case.
Yeah.
But what does it all mean?
Right.
Why should this story, this tragedy, matter to those who never knew Rachel Winkler?
That's a great question, and I think it's one that we'll explore in part 3.
Yeah, I think we should.
We'll delve into the broader implications of this case.
Right.
The lessons we can learn and the actions we can take to prevent future tragedies like this from happening.
Absolutely. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, we have to learn from this. So we've gone pretty deep into the specifics of the Rachel Winkler case.
Right.
The evidence, the trial, the twists and turns.
All of it.
But like you said,
there's
a bigger conversation here.
I think so.
Why should this case matter to our listener?
I think it's a question we should all ask ourselves.
Right.
With any true crime story that really captivates us. This isn't just entertainment.
Right.
Rachel's case, while unique in its details, really shines a light on this dark reality of domestic abuse.
Yeah, it's a problem that affects
right.
countless individuals and families.
So many.
Often hidden behind closed doors.
That's the hardest part.
And, going through all this material, one thing that struck me was how easily the warning signs were dismissed or overlooked. The emotional neglect, the controlling behavior, those volatile arguments, looking back. These were all red flags.
Yeah, it's easy to play armchair detective after the fact.
Right. Yeah.
But the truth is, recognizing abuse in real time can be very challenging.
Yeah.
It often starts subtly with emotional manipulation that can be really hard to pinpoint. The victim might not even realize they're being abused. And those around them might just see it as a rocky relationship.
So what can we learn from this?
Wow.
If we can't always prevent these tragedies, how do we at least become more aware, more sensitive to the signs?
Awareness is key.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves about the different forms of abuse.
Yeah.
It's not always physical. It can be emotional, financial, psychological. Learning to recognize those subtle signs of control and manipulation. I think that's really crucial.
So if someone listening to this right now is thinking, wait a minute. Some of this sounds familiar. What can they do?
Well, first, trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels wrong in a relationship, it probably is. There are resources available, hotlines, shelters, support groups. Reaching out to a trusted friend, family member, or professional can make all the difference.
And for those of us on the outside, what can we do? It's easy to feel helpless.
Helplessness is a natural response. But it shouldn't paralyze us. Sometimes just being a supportive presence can be impactful. Listen without judgment. Offer help without pushing. And believe survivors when they share their experiences.
It's about creating a culture where victims feel safe coming forward. Knowing they'll be believed and supported.
That's the most important thing.
We have to remember that abuse thrives in silence.
That's right.
And let's not forget about the lasting impact of these tragedies. Rachel's children are now living with the trauma.
It's awful.
Of losing their mother in such a horrific way. Their lives are forever changed.
100%.
And that's something that really stayed with me throughout this deep dive. We can focus on the legal case, the evidence, the verdict. But behind it all, there are real people whose lives have been shattered.
And there are so many cases like this.
It's a sobering reminder.
It is.
That domestic violence isn't just a private matter.
No, it's not.
It ripples outward, affecting families, communities, and society as a whole.
Absolutely. We need to address it as a collective problem, not an individual one.
So where do we go from here?
Wow.
How do we channel this awareness into action? It feels like such a massive issue. It's hard to know where to even begin.
You're right. It can feel overwhelming. But every step, no matter how small, makes a difference.
Aye.
Supporting organizations that work with survivors.
Right.
Educating ourselves and others. Advocating for policy changes.
Right.
These are all ways to contribute to the solution.
Rachel's story might be over,
Yeah.
but our responsibility to learn from it, to act on it,
Yes.
has just begun.
We have to learn from this.
It's about turning this tragedy
Right.
into a catalyst for change.
Exactly. Let this case be a reminder
Yeah.
that even in the darkest of situations,
Yeah.
hope and the pursuit of justice can prevail.
That's powerful.
And let it inspire us all to work towards a future where violence against women is
what you
no
mean.
longer tolerated,
Right.
no longer accepted,
Right.
no longer a part of our reality.
Well said.
Thank you.
That's a really powerful message to end on.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground today,
we have.
delved into some heavy stuff.
Very heavy.
But let's not leave this conversation
No.
feeling overwhelmed or hopeless.
No, not at all.
Instead, let's turn that awareness into action.
Absolutely.
Support the cause.
Yes.
Be an advocate.
Be a voice.
Be a voice for those who can no longer speak for themselves.
That's right.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for having me.
It's been heavy, but essential.
It has been.
Stay informed.
Stay engaged.
Stay engaged. And until next time,
Yes.
keep asking the tough questions.
The chilling case of Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, a Maplewood man who admitted to the brutal murders and dismemberment of 2 women he dated, shocked Minnesota and beyond. In a harrowing courtroom confession, Jorgensen revealed the gruesome details of how he killed Fanta Zayavong and Manijay Mani Starin, hid their bodies, and attempted to cover his tracks. This true crime story delves into the investigation, the evidence, and the emotional toll on the victims' families, offering a gripping account of justice served in the face of unimaginable cruelty.
The case against Jorgensen began in April 2023, when Starin's father reported her missing. He expressed concern that she had been afraid of her boyfriend. Investigators soon identified Jorgensen as the last person seen with her. Surveillance footage showed Jorgensen entering Starin's apartment 28 times, carrying duffel bags and a suitcase. These disturbing images became key evidence in the investigation. Days later, her remains were discovered in a storage locker in Woodbury. Building managers had complained of a foul odor from Starin's apartment. Jorgensen had grown aggressive when they attempted to enter. The situation raised further suspicion, leading authorities to review other missing persons cases. In May 2023, police received a tip about Fanta Zayavong, missing since September 2021. Investigators reviewed messages in which Jorgensen admitted breaking his hand by striking her. Witnesses recalled a terrible smell at his Shoreview townhouse. After Jorgensen moved out, cleaning crews found suspicious stains and a lingering odor. Authorities launched a deeper investigation. Soon, they discovered Zayavong's remains in a storage unit in Coon Rapids. The discovery was gruesome. Zayavong's body had been dismembered and placed in plastic containers. Alongside her remains, authorities found knives believed to have been used in the crime. Her hands had been bound behind her back. The similarities between both cases were undeniable. Both women had been attacked in private settings, their bodies concealed in storage lockers. Investigators concluded that Jorgensen had deliberately tried to cover up his crimes. Police arrested Jorgensen in June 2023. He was charged with Starin's murder, and later with Zayavong's killing as well. His history of violence and control had finally caught up with him. On January 3, 2025, Jorgensen stood before the court and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. His confession detailed how he choked Starren after she asked him to leave. He admitted to being intoxicated during both killings. In Zayavong's case, Jorgensen confessed to repeatedly striking her before killing her. His brutal knee strike to the head caused severe trauma. As investigators listened, he revealed his method of dismemberment to evade capture. The prosecution emphasized Jorgensen's calculated brutality. His pattern of violence against women and his attempts to hide the crimes made him a serious threat. Judge Leonardo Castro sentenced him to 40 years for each murder, served concurrently. The severity of the sentence reflected the cruelty of the crimes. Prosecutors highlighted aggravating factors, including the intimate relationship between Jorgensen and his victims. His deliberate efforts to conceal their deaths further justified the harsh punishment. Ramsey County Attorney John Choi praised law enforcement for their persistence. He acknowledged the pain suffered by the victims' families. Their relentless pursuit of justice ensured that Jorgensen would never harm another woman again. Family members of both victims expressed a mix of relief and sorrow. While nothing could bring their loved ones back, knowing that Jorgensen would spend the rest of his life behind bars offered some closure. During sentencing, Jorgensen showed little emotion. He claimed to regret his actions but provided no real justification. The courtroom remained tense as the final judgment was delivered, sealing his fate. The tragic deaths of Zayavong and Starren serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic violence. Their families hope their stories will encourage others to seek help before it is too late. Justice was served, but the scars remain. Law enforcement officials stress the importance of early intervention in abusive relationships. The failure to act sooner cost 2 women their lives. The case serves as a painful lesson for the justice system. As Jorgensen begins his decades-long sentence, the community mourns the loss of 2 promising lives. Their families, forever changed by the tragedy, hope that raising awareness will prevent future victims from suffering a similar fate. The case of Joseph Stephen Jorgensen is a chilling example of domestic violence taken to its worst extreme. His victims suffered unimaginable terror at the hands of someone they once trusted. Though justice prevailed, their loss is irreversible. These murders reveal the importance of addressing warning signs before it's too late. Friends, family, and law enforcement must work together to protect those at risk. Preventing violence requires awareness, action, and support for victims. Jorgensen will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But for the families of Fanta Zayavong and Manisha Starren, no sentence can bring back their loved ones. Their memories live on, serving as a stark warning about the deadly consequences of unchecked abuse.
Welcome in, everyone. Today we're going deep on a case that really shook up the community. We're looking at this double murder case involving Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, using news articles about the crimes, the trial, and sentencing as our sources.
Yeah, this is heavy stuff. Definitely sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to handle it with respect, obviously.
Of course, respect for the victims, Manisha Starren and Fanta Zayavong, and their families, of course. I think what makes this case maybe even more significant is that it really shows how domestic violence can go from what might seem like small things to really awful acts.
Exactly. And these women, they were more than just victims, right? They have lives, relationships, futures that were stolen from them. But looking into Jorgensen, the articles immediately show some red flags, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think what's really striking is that he had a history of violence. Even before this all happened, there's evidence, even messages where he admits to breaking Zayavong's hand. And, sadly, this is kind of classic, how abusers escalate over time.
Yeah.
It might start small, but it's a pattern. Violence leads to more violence.
It's chilling to think about, but it's so important for anyone listening to know those early signs, to recognize them. What I found really disturbing is how similar the actual crimes were. The sources really point to a pattern, a scary one.
Yeah, it's unsettling, the parallels. Both women attacked in private places, feeling safe. Starin in her own apartment, Jaehong at his townhouse, and then both their bodies end up in storage lockers. That says there's planning, a real attempt to hide what he did. Really tells you something about his state of mind.
Yeah, and the articles, they get into some graphic details, like there's this surveillance footage showing Jorgensen at Starin's place going in and out, carrying these bags, suitcases. It's a really haunting image.
It is. And it wasn't just about hiding the bodies, right? Like building managers, they were reporting this awful smell from Starin's apartment. And when they tried to check, Jorgensen got aggressive, wouldn't let them in. It was like a desperate attempt to cover it all up, which obviously failed.
Yeah, and then there's the discovery of Zayavong's body. The articles describe it as dismembered.
Yeah.
It's horrifying, the level of brutality.
And that dismemberment, it's not just random violence. It seems calculated, right?
Well,
Way to make getting rid of the body and identifying it even harder. It adds a whole other layer to the psychological picture,
Thankfully, Jorgensen was caught in June of 23. He eventually pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. What does a guilty plea actually mean in this situation for people who might not be familiar with all the legal terms?
Good question. A guilty plea here means he admitted to doing it, to the charges. So no trial, straight to sentencing. Basically, he owned up to it, accepted the consequences legally.
Okay. And for that, he got 40 years for each murder served concurrently. That sentencing, it must involve a lot of factors, right?
No, tons. Sentencing is never simple. The judge looks at everything. How bad the crimes were, past criminal history, anything that makes it worse or maybe less bad, mitigating factors. In Jorgensen's case, they probably focused on the planning, the brutality, the fact that it was an intimate partner relationship.
Yeah.
All those point towards a longer sentence.
Yeah, it's complicated for sure. And while the legal part is done, the families of the victims, they're still dealing with this huge loss, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The articles, they have some of their statements. It's a mix of, relief that Jorgensen's off the streets, but also just overwhelming sadness, anger. Nothing brings their loved ones back, It goes way beyond the courtroom.
It does. And that kind of brings us to a key point of this whole deep dive, right? It's not just about this case. It's about learning from it. Recognizing those warning signs, maybe even preventing something like this from happening again.
Exactly. This is a wake-up call. Even though it's such a tragedy, we all got to play a part in stopping domestic violence. And it's not always the obvious stuff, the physical abuse.
Right.
It can be emotional, controlling someone, isolating them from family and friends, even their money.
Yeah, such a good point. It's about picking up on those subtle things, those patterns of control that can get so bad if no one does anything. And it can happen to anyone, right?
Exactly. Age, background, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's why we got to be aware. Trust our gut. If something feels wrong, like with a friend, family member, they seem scared, isolated, maybe injuries they can't explain, don't ignore it, Better safe than sorry.
What about someone who's actually experiencing abuse themselves? What's that first step they should take?
Knowing they're not alone, that's huge. There are IS help out there. Reaching out, that takes strength.
Yeah.
There are hotlines, shelters, support groups, so many people who want to help, get them to safety, help them rebuild.
Leaving a relationship like that, it can be so hard, even dangerous.
Oh, yeah. The abuser might get worse if they think they're losing control. Having a plan, that's crucial.
A safety plan.
Yeah, like a bag packed with essentials, knowing safe places to go, maybe a code word with people you trust to signal danger, practical steps, for protection.
With Jorgensen, it feels like there were times someone could have stepped in. People knew about his past, but this still happened. What can we learn from that?
It makes you think about how, as a society, we view these things. People don't want to get involved in, private matters. But when there's violence, it's not private anymore. It's everyone's problem.
So how do we, as a society, get better at this?
Well, the police, they need the right training, to spot domestic violence, know how to respond, how to keep people safe, a clear plan of action.
And beyond law enforcement, it feels like we need to change how we think about domestic violence overall. Not blaming the victim, but focusing on the abuser, holding them accountable.
Exactly. We need a culture that says no to violence, period. Where victims feel safe coming forward, and abusers, they face the consequences of what they do.
So what about our listener? What can they do right now to make things better?
Honestly, the biggest thing is education. Learn the signs, don't blame the victim. And if you think someone's in danger, be there for them. Just listening, believing them, helping them find resources, that can be huge.
It can feel overwhelming, but like you said, small actions add up.
Absolutely. Break the silence, challenge what's considered normal, and don't accept violence as something that just, happens.
Yeah, if someone listening is going through abuse, remember, you're not alone, there's help, and you deserve to be safe.
There are organizations out there, like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, Ray 9, local shelters. You don't have to face this by yourself.
Remember, staying quiet only helps the abuser. By speaking out, you can break that cycle and help make things safer for everyone. It's hard to fully grasp Jorgensen getting decades in prison. But for the families of Minija and Fanta, real justice, it might just never feel possible.
You're right. That's a really key point. The system can punish him, but it can't fix what's broken, The scars, the lives that are shattered, the impact, all of it. That doesn't end when he's sentenced.
That's why this deep dive felt important, I think.
Yeah.
Not just about one crime, but about seeing domestic violence as a whole. The signs, the ways the system fails, letting this happen again and again.
And the most heartbreaking part is these murders and so many others, they could have been stopped. Maybe if someone had, stepped in sooner, seen the signs, or if it had worked better.
Yeah, it's hard not to think about the what ifs, but we got to turn that into action, right?
Oh, right.
We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it. Work towards a future where this isn't so common.
That starts with education, making people aware. Building a culture where violence is just, it's not okay in any way. People need to know the signs, how to speak up, how to get help, how to support those who are, going through it.
And supporting those groups working directly on this, right?
Exactly.
Shelters, hotlines, advocates, they're doing amazing work, but they need help.
Absolutely. Even if it's just volunteering, donating, or even just, telling people about these resources, every bit counts.
So as we finish up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. What can you do? Maybe it's learning those signs we talked about, supporting a local group, or having that tough conversation with someone you're worried about.
Every single thing helps. It's about speaking up, challenging what's accepted, not just accepting that violence is how it is.
It's about knowing domestic violence. It's not a private issue. It's a problem for all of us. And it needs our attention, our compassion, our dedication to change things.
And remember, you don't have to be, some kind of expert to make a difference. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen, believe what someone's telling you, and just be there for them.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It was heavy, but important. We hope, by talking about this case, we've, started a conversation, made people realize this is urgent. And most of all, that you can DO something. Because together, we can make a world where violence isn't normal, it's rare. Where everyone feels safe, valued, respected,